Larry Kasda. Lawrence Kasda is currently the Chief Registered Environmental Health Specialist, REHS, and leads the Consumer Health Inspection Services Unit for the Monmouth County Health Department. Mr. Kasda has been a licensed REHS for 49 years and worked extensively in municipal government before coming to the Monmouth County Health Department in 2005. With that, Larry?
Thank you. Hello. I didn't even say anything yet. Good morning, everybody. My name is Larry Kasda, and despite my boyish good looks and youthful enthusiasm, I have, in fact, been in public health for just shy of 50 years. And for the last 16 months, I've had the privilege of being the Chief Registered Environmental Health Specialist and the unit head for Consumer Health and Inspection Services for the Monmouth County Health Department. Hit me. So we're here to talk about hoarding awareness. And it was my hope that in hoarding awareness, we would have the opportunity to discuss roles, responsibilities, resources, skill sets, and approaches to inspections, investigations, interagency cooperation. Well, if we're talking enforcement, here are some of our skill sets. My personal experience is when people don't know what to do, most of the time, they decide it's a good idea to call the health department. And clearly, I enjoy that slide a lot more than everybody else. So what is a registered environmental health specialist? For the uninitiated, a registered environmental health specialist is a public health professional. We are trained and licensed by the state of New Jersey to identify public health hazards and enforce applicable laws to protect the public. We are educators, we are consultants, we are sometimes confessors, and we are also enforcement agents. And our ultimate sanction as an enforcement agent is to write somebody a summons and bring them in front of a court of competent jurisdiction, which is usually municipal court. So what is, and that's, hoarding is so difficult to deal with because we don't really have answers. Because as I'm going to talk about, enforcement, I suggest, is not really an effective solution. But we'll get to that in a minute. Traditional enforcement, what do? Oh, it can include possessions or animals. Most of the time we get complaints about the inside of the house. Occasionally, there's issues related to the outside of the house. Hit me. So what is traditional enforcement? Traditional enforcement, most of us pretty much know this, okay? You go out, you find the owner of the place, you either go find out from the C of O, or you can go to the tax records. We show up, we make a site visit, we make an assessment, we list our violations, we send the person an abatement notice. The abatement notice has a time frame associated to it, and when if it's not abated during the time frame that's issued, then we write them a summons. So there's a progression. And one of the problems that we have is sometimes, I call it, I'm not an attorney, but I call it due process. You have to give them due process and the opportunity to fix the problem. And sometimes one of the issues that we run into is due process is sometimes misinterpreted by other people as inaction or indifference. Problem is Department of Health doesn't really have a whole lot of regulations when we start talking about housing. Our regulations say you have to have an approved supply of potable water. You have to be connected to an approved septic system or sewage disposal system, and you have to have heat in the winter. And that's really pretty much the extent of it. So we have the Public Health Nuisance Code. So people will come to us and say, well, you're hanging, you're not doing nothing. You lazy government guy. I'm good friends with fill in the blank. I'm good friends with the mayor. I'm good friends with this guy. I'm good friends with that guy. I'm calling Senator such and such. happens all the time. Why don't you just declare it uninhabitable? Well, there's the New Jersey Relocation Assistance Act, and very simply put, what it says is that I can't come and put you out on the street as a tenant and then, job well done, I'm going home. So because it ensures that displaced people receive fair assistance. Condemnation and eviction was reviewed very effectively by Chris Benson just a moment ago. I was impressed. But we don't have the opportunity, we don't have the authority to condemn, and eviction is a landlord-tenant issue, and it's not a government issue. So we go through the whole process, we end up writing our summonses, we go to court, we sit down with the judge, we sit down with the prosecutor, and they bring you into the back room and they say, Lar, what do you expect me to do with this? Because they don't have answers either. You have to explain to the judge that this is not a penalty action. It's not just give them a fine and we're all going home. We're looking for relief. We're looking for a remedy from the court. And in order to do that, we would request that the judge provide additional motivation. Now, what's motivation? Well, we ask that the judge get up there and threaten them with zillions of dollars worth of fines and breathe some fire and brimstone down from the bench and try to scare the pants off the person. And then if they actually comply, the judge can suspend the fines, or there's a lot of options that they have. But applying judicial motivation is stressful, and the person's already stressed. You can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped, and you can't tell somebody anything that they don't already know. And I believe that then, and I believe it now. And then we have some other issues that we have to consider. You have the right to reside in your home in any manner that you wish, free from intervention from people like me or the code enforcement officers or anybody else, unless the occupant presents an imminent medical concern or conditions immediately dangerous to life and health. All right, we got a couple of minutes. I want to tell you a story. So 11:30, I got hours. So I get called out in a municipality which shall remain nameless by the administrator. And he says, and the house that I got called out to was a known residence of a person with a hoarding disorder. Is that good? Yeah. So we kind of knew what we were walking into. So I go in, I was not the first person on the scene, but I go in there and the administrator guy says to me, Lar, look at this. And does anybody know what a Bilko door is? That's the garage doors that are in the back, the door to the basement that's kind of on an angle and they open like, so he opens up the Bilko doors and the basement is flooded all the way up to the top of the stairs. So I walked around the corner and I looked at the electrical meter, and the electrical meter is spinning. And I thought, oh, and this is not good. We need to call the code enforcement officer. We need to call the subcode official. We need to call somebody because, and so we call him up and the guy says, oh, well, we don't do mold. We don't do mold. And I said, mold? I said, we're not talking about mold. We're talking about submerged electrical outlets and the house is powered. We're talking about submerged water lines. We're talking about submerged gas lines. This place could blow up and you're talking to me about mold. So that's immediately dangerous to life and health. Whenever possible, we try to invite the municipal officials, the code enforcement officers, the property maintenance officers, the housing officials. We try to invite them in. Some towns are very proactive and very receptive, and some towns are, we're working with them. Actually, when you get into a multifamily unit or a senior tower or something like that, enforcement actually becomes easier than a single family owner occupied house, because you figure they probably have heat, they probably have water, they probably have electric, they might have food or meals on wheels, or if they don't, those resources are available because of where they live. Whereas somebody in a single family house may not have access to that, and they don't want to reach out for reasons that we had talked about before. The effect on the adjacent units. Basically, you can live in your house however you want, unless your actions stop me from living in my house the way I want. And once that happens, at least the way I've always played the game, that's when it becomes potentially actionable. And I can write you a notice of abatement, or I can write you a summons for insect harborage or rodent harborage, because the problem is affecting adjacent units. It's kind of tough for me to come along and write you a summons for having a bunch of junk on the floor, or living with a hoarding disorder. I don't have a regulation on that. So let's do the next one. And as we say, but because of the multifaceted underlying conditions which result in hoarding situations, enforcement is admittedly not an effective option. And I respectfully suggest that you can't litigate the SM5. So what do? I think that the answer might be, and some people have mentioned this as well before, an assessment by somebody who's qualified to render such assessments, somebody who has the ability of effecting meaningful short-term and long-term assistance. REHS and code enforcement people are not really trained, or in my opinion, qualified to render those type of assessments. Not as an enforcement officer. Go ahead. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we do not have a role in the process, or that we won't be called to render such assessments anyway, because that happens all the time as well. Unfairly, IMO, but it does. But somebody is always the first person on the scene. And this first person on the scene is usually the REHS or the property maintenance officer or the code guy. And there's useful information. Whoever's going to do an assessment, if we're lucky enough to get an assessment, and that's what Monmouth Acts is all about. If we're lucky enough to get somebody to make an assessment, there is some information that we can gain from being diligent. One of the things as well, when I put this together, all these pictures and stuff that we have, that we took and gathered up and stuff, every one of them is the same picture. Different house, different junk, same picture, over and over and over and over again. And I thought that was interesting, significant, and worthy of observation. Preparation is important. So the person's calling you up and they're complaining, oh, the guy next door, it's terrible, it's this, it's that, you should nuke the house and salt the earth so that nothing ever grows there again. Let them tell you their story, because there's a lot of information that you can gain from listening to what the people have to say, because they're living there and you're not. Consider what they're saying, consider questions, and consider what you can infer from their answers. Is the issue inside or outside? What does that mean? How long has the condition existed? There's going to tell me some useful information. Does the individual live alone? Physical, emotional support, economic assistance, emotional assistance. We're getting all these inferences just from what these people are telling us. Do you ever see the lights on at night? What's that telling us? Do they have electric? Do they have refrigeration? Do they have heat? Do they have ventilation? Potable water is a little bit more difficult. Your complainant may not know that information. You may have to call the municipality or the local water purveyor and find out if they've been turned off for a non-payment, or if they've been turned off because the basement is flooded all the way to the top of the Bilco doors. How about garbage? Municipal or private? Are they on a stop list? You can call up the garbage hauler and ask them. Are they on a stop list for non-payment? Does the individual go out during the day? Do they have a vehicle? Are they capable of going out to the supermarket or the store in order to get the things that everybody needs to basically survive? And also, if I go over there, are they going to be there? When's the best time to make the trip? What's the outside look like? We haven't been there yet. This is just a phone call. Do I have insects? Do I have rodents? Do I have West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis and chikungunya? And I'm looking at you, Vicky. Do we have garbage? Do we have debris? Do we have vermin? Do we have food? Are we going to worry about raccoons and skunks and foxes? And from a public health point of view, now I'm worried about rabies, and the ball just keeps rolling. So now we're going to go off and we're going to try to talk to the occupant. And we're going to attempt to establish some sort of dialogue with the individual. And the worst thing you can do is go up and bang on the front door and show them your Monmouth County gas card and say, I'm here from the Monmouth County Health Department. I'm the chief registered environmental health specialist, and sir, we have some serious problems here. I believe that you're in violation of the Public Health Nuisance Code, Section 2. That's the person's already scared. The person's already stressed. They know 9 times out of 10 why you're there and what's going on. Don't try to present yourself as an enforcement officer. It's not going to get you anywhere, at least not initially. Try to approach them like a real human being. Try to approach them with a little bit of compassion. Try to approach them with a little bit of understanding and listen to what they have to say, because all that stuff also is going to be useful in any sort of assessment or as an aid to any sort of assessment that can come up. Ask them the general questions and anything else you can think of as is appropriate to what you're seeing and hearing and smelling at the moment. Try to determine if the occupant is receptive. We have Monmouth Acts. It's a resource, but you can't force it on them. People have to take that step themselves. See if you can get contact information, family members, phone numbers, addresses. All of that stuff may be useful in any sort of assessment. Once again, you're going to check with your housing, your municipal officials, your code enforcement, your property maintenance people. Don't act unilaterally whenever possible. Coordinate with other enforcement agencies. The worst thing that can happen is he's the code enforcement officer. I'm the Department of Health guy. I give you a written notice and I say you have to abate it within 5 days. and the code enforcement officer gives you a written notice for the same thing and says you have to abate it in 15 days. Now you have conflicting notices, you have conflicting abatement dates, and if I was the defendant at that point, I'm going to get up in front of the judge and I'm going to say, Your Honor, I got this guy telling me one thing, I got this guy telling me something else. These guys are clowns. They don't know what they're talking about. Everybody's telling me something different. I'm just a poor guy on Social Security. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here, and there's nobody to help me. And know what I mean? So enforcement in and of itself is time consuming. It suggests inaction or indifference to the people who want a response yesterday. It doesn't address the underlying conditions of the hoarding disorder. It's a source of anguish. It's a source of stress for both the hoarding individual and, frankly, the enforcing agent as well. Because this stuff is, we get these things and you think to yourself, this is going to be a long one. My final observations on enforcement, and that's pretty much everything I have. Thank you very much for your kind attention.